الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So inshallah we will pick up where we left off last week, and we are up to ayah number 153. So if you think about the general themes which are going on, we started that in the beginning in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced different groups. They're the believers, the hypocrites, the disbelievers. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started talking about Bani Israel. And there was a long passage which was about the ahd that the Bani Israel were given and they violated. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about the issue of the Qibla and how Ibrahim alayhi salam built the Kaaba, the du'as that he made, and how he left his children after his death. And moving on to the point where the Kaaba is now the Qibla. Now, there's a change in topic, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now addressing the believers, and the address to the believers will come with different aspects. So there will be issues of jihad, there will be issues of family life, there will be issues of ahkam that will come in all of this. And when it comes to reading the Qur'an, we have to understand that when we read the Qur'an, it seems that the topics are all over the place. But there is some connection. And this is a deeper study of the Qur'an, that those people who are blessed to really, you could say, they are deep divers into the Qur'an. They are the ones that will tell you, well, these ayat are related to first four ayat. You know, one of the shuyukh, he said that if you look at Surah Al-Rahman and Surah Al-Waqi'ah, they are both mirror images of each other. What Surah Al-Rahman talks about in the end, Surah Al-Waqi'ah talks about in the beginning. What Surah Al-Rahman talks about in the middle, Surah Al-Waqi'ah talks about in the middle. What Surah Al-Rahman talks about in the beginning, Surah Al-Waqi'ah talks about in the end. So they will completely go together, and they will like stick together like this, basically, like, you know, in finding parallels. So there's lots and lots of what you would say patterns in the Quran, and those patterns have their own wisdom in them. They have their own wisdom in them. Even the placement of the surahs, there are certain things that you will see. So again, that's more of a deep dive into the Quran, that what we are doing is a very, very shallow level understanding. The point that I want to make is that when you see, especially within a surah, you say all of a sudden, where did this come from? It didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere. This came from the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At this point, we may not understand it, but there will come a time when we will understand it. So to give you an example, so I grew up in New York City, and I saw 9/11 happen with my own eyes when I was in madrasa, in memorizing Qur'an in Flushing, New York. And of course, when that happened, I'm sure that every Muslim in America felt that sense of fear. And you feel like, okay, you know, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go forward, or am I supposed to go behind? Because if you go behind, you are abandoning your deen. If you continue to stay firm on your deen, you feel like, you know, people might attack you, the government might come after you. It was that time of fear. So there was a young boy, a young man, 21 years old. He came the week after. He was supposed to be giving the khutbah anyways. So he came and he gave the khutbah, and everybody is wondering like, okay, what are you going to say in the khutbah? It's like, where do you find the wisdom in the Quran to connect with your situation right now? And again, I'm like 13 years old at the time, and he comes and he begins the khutbah with these ayat, which is, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu sta'inu bis sabri was salah, inna allaha ma'as sabirin. Actually, sorry, he didn't start with this. He started with this ayah, which is, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. He says that, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us that we are going to test you for sure with different tests. And the first one among them is going to be fear. And then hunger, famine, and loss of family members, loss of people, and loss of wealth. All of this is part of the test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to remain patient during this time. If you think about our brothers in Gaza right now, what is their test right now? All of them, right? Especially hunger. I would say that they are not afraid, but of course there is that constant attack, and hunger, and loss of self, loss of wealth, lots of anything good that you know of in this world, essentially. And but they are patient. If you think about our brothers and sisters in China, what is their test? What do you think? Uyghur community. Fear being number one. And then if you're ever discovered, if you are pointed out, marked that this is a person who's practicing Islam, then all of the other ones will come as well. Then if you think about our brothers in Burma, Rohingya, what is their test? What is that? All of them. And again, beginning with fear and famine and all of the other ones. So basically, you will see. Now, when have the Muslims in the United States been tested? Perhaps, the moment that shook everyone here was, those 9/11 days where it was like, okay, so many people, they kind of went underground, masajid. I mean, I'm telling you that I was a teenager at the time, and we used to have a group of students, and we had a sheikh who had studied in Sudan, and we used to basically go to different masajid and just meet up there for Maghrib, and we would just sit together and have a talk. I'm telling you that no masjid would let us meet to have a halaqah. They were afraid that if these young kids are meeting, then we're going to get the FBI to come and raid us. So we couldn't find. Sometimes we would go in the park, sit on the benches and do halaqah over there because the masajid would not let us. Sometimes our teacher, we would meet, it was cold, we couldn't be in the park. So we would a few of us would cramp in his car and meet over there and go through our material. But subhanAllah, those were the days. So remember that one of the things that Islam requires us, and we will be tested with, is to come out of our comfort zone. To come out of our comfort zone. If you expect to always just remain in luxury, then you're probably not properly following Islam. There is something wrong there. If you think about the best of us, the best of the ummah, the Sahaba, if you remember, we talked about Al-Arqam ibn Abil Arqam. And Al-Arqam, radiyallahu anh, he was the person who was from the tribe of Abu Jahl. And his house was the one that was used in order to teach Islam. But essentially, Al-Arqam he was someone who came from a wealthy family. His father left him many houses. He was from a powerful tribe. His tribesman is the chief of Mecca. no one will mess with him. But even him, he has to basically live a simple, quiet life. If he's an outspoken person, attention will come to him. So what test do you think Al-Arqam faced from these tests that you see? I would say naqsim min al-thamarat. Loss of, so not necessarily crops for everyone. For the people of Medina, their thamarat are the crops, agriculture. But for other people, they have a great potential in their business, in their wealth. Think about today that if you want to do ethical business, ethical career, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table. You could make a lot more if you are willing to go and work for anybody and everybody. But if you say, no, you know what, I'm not going to work for people who are not, banks, finance institutions, other companies out there where they're doing questionable stuff. I have a friend of mine, he's a real estate landlord. He has like commercial properties, and like every few weeks he calls me, he says, hey, I got this really good possible tenant, but they do payday loans. You know, those cash pawn type of stuff where they give you like crazy high, like 200% interest-based loans in order for you to pay back when your paycheck comes. Once you take that loan, you never actually are able to pay back. So he's like, okay, I got this one. I'm like, you know what? If you want to stay firm on your deen and answer Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you have the power to do so, don't give your property to these people because they're using, they're using this for a lot of oppression. Then he says, well, somebody came and they said that, okay, we will rent your space. You build it for us. But they have given me a layout where I can clearly tell that they're trying to build an alcohol freezer, alcohol fridge type of thing. So I told him, look, you can give them as a grocery store, but you can't give them as this, as knowingly that they're going, and you're building it for them. That is something you can rent it out to them and say, okay, this is a grocery store. Now what they do with it is their business. That is perhaps, you're not involved in that. They did whatever they did. So he's like, I'm leaving a lot of money on the table because you're telling me this type of business is out of the question. This type of business is out. This type of business is out. So I'm like, well, وَنَقْسِم مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ. This is the test. Doctors, people who work in government, people who work in different people who buy and sell, people who are working in a store just selling retail. If you are firm upon your deen, every single day and every single week you're going to leave some money on the table. Sometimes it's haram money, sometimes it's doubtful money. But this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu sta'inu bis-sabri was-salah. When you feel that tightness, because you're trying to stay firm, when you feel that tightness, then seek help and assistance in sabr, in patience and prayer. This is where you will get your backing. Seek comfort in that remain firm and rush to your salah. Salah will give you that comfort that, you know what, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing. Inna Allah ma'as sabirin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is truly with those who are patient. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Qur'an, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forget. And إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah does not waste the reward of those who do good. Constantly in the Quran, Allah tells us, if you are giving up something for the sake of Allah, Allah is not going to forget it, and Allah is not going to waste it. You are not going to come on the day of judgment and find there's nothing left. I'll give you an example of someone who left so much money on the table. And this was Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah. Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, he was someone who did a lot of positive changes within a short period. One of the first things that he did, which is completely against his, you could say, his family's policy, is that they used to curse the Ahlul Bayt from the mimbar. So every week in the Jummah time, when at the end of the Jummah khutbah, basically Umayyads are in control, and their political rivals are basically the descendants of the Prophet, Ahlul Bayt, and they would basically, every khatib was supposed to say something bad about them. That, na'udhu billah, these people are this, these people are that, and they would essentially curse them. Umar bin Abdul Aziz is also an Umayyad. He is benefiting from this whole thing, but the first thing that he does, because he was a person of knowledge and righteousness, he says, no one is allowed to say anything bad about Ahlul Bayt. And he said that instead what you say is, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba. We say this until today as a sunnah of the khutbah that has been followed from the time of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. That, you know what, this is what Allah reminds us, commands us. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal bagh ya'izukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. And if you think about wa ita'i dhil qurba, is talking about what? It's talking about that if you are supposed to be kind to your relatives, then what about the relatives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Think about that. Then he basically brings, he calls his, you could say, accountant. He says, okay, bring all the records and bring all of the family that has been given like large estates. And he says, okay, take each paper out that has been written that, okay, you have been given this land. He says, okay, you have been given this, rip it up. And literally you can imagine like a scene in your mind that one by one, a person, he's taking one paper, and there's like a family sitting over there that this paper was issued to them, that you have this land, and he's ripping it up, and they're standing and they're screaming and they're yelling, saying, what are you doing? This is something that your predecessors have given it to us, it's legitimate, and this and that. He says, no, this is not your wealth, this is the wealth of the ummah. Now, he rules for 2.5 years or so, even less than 2.5 actually, and he dies. And he leaves behind his children without any wealth. And of course, he leaves behind his children without any wealth. And as soon as he dies, basically, there's a revolution and there's a counter-revolution. So, the next one that takes over starts to kind of bring back the old family. Because the thing is that if you are ruling in this non-popularly elected manner, you have to have a support group and you have to keep filling their mouths so that they will not rebel against you. So any royal family, if the king becomes so righteous and pure, his own family will be the first to assassinate him. Because they will be like, okay, if you are the king and we're not benefiting from you, if we're not going to benefit from you alive, maybe we should get rid of you and install your brother or your son or somebody else in order so that we could get that benefit. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz passes away with his children essentially broke. And as soon as the next one takes over, immediately all of those previous deeds are restored. And the Umayyad princes, except for the sons of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who are also Umayyad princes, they are all very wealthy. And one of the scholars, he said that I saw in a few years, I saw that the respect and the love and the wealth that came as a result to the children of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, I saw them to be some of the most beloved people in the community. And I saw the Umayyad princes that were very, very wealthy. I saw them broke and walking in the streets, and no one even wants to talk to them. Because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you do the right thing, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He doesn't forget, He doesn't waste your good deeds. He will take care of you in this dunya and He will take care of you in the hereafter. So difficulties will come if you do the right thing. Tests will come but be patient. Remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who are patient. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ. From the difficulties, the first one Allah mentions is that some people will be tested by loss of life. And we call them the shuhada, the martyrs. And for the shuhada, there's no wait for them that they will enter Jannah on the Day of Judgment. The shuhada will enter Jannah as soon as they die. But they have an existence where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, like we eat every day, they eat every day. They are being provided rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ways that we cannot truly comprehend, but they have a life of their own. So literally, they are able to look back at us. They can't communicate with us and we can't communicate with them, but they're able to look back at us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that Allah asked the shuhada of Uhud that what is it that you wish for? And they said, Ya Allah, the shahada that we experience is such a beautiful thing that we want our brothers to know about it, but they don't know. So what can we do? That we want them to know that this is something which is beautiful. This is something not to be scared of. This is not something to be worried about. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayat which are in Surah Ali Imran, which is وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ فَرِحِينَ بِمَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that they are happy from what Allah has given them. In fact, some of the scholars have said that often when you see the shuhada, people who die this blessed death, there is a certain expression left on their face. And there are so many pictures and videos of people that have died a blessed death, and you see their face, they are smiling. They are smiling. And some of the scholars have said that the minute that they experience death, they also see Jannah. And that last expression on their face becomes still on it. So we even see them that they have left this world, but they are in a state of happiness. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't even call those people dead. They are not dead. بَلْ أَحْيَاء. Rather, they are alive. وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. But you do not perceive it. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. We will certainly test you with a touch of fear and famine and loss of property and life and crops. And crops here for those who are in agriculture, for those who are in other businesses, other careers, then it will be there that they will be essentially leaving money on the table. In the time of the Prophet, in the time of Tabuk, for example, they were asked to go out on a mission when the harvest was ready. If you don't harvest plants, if you're raising herbs and fruits, if you don't harvest them at the right time, they will essentially spoil because you didn't take them off the trees. So they had to, it was a test from Allah, leave it. And in the people, agriculture society, it gets paid once a year, which is at the time of the harvest. So if you don't collect your paycheck at that time, you will starve the entire year because you left it on the trees. So Allah says that you will be tested, but وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give good news to those who patiently endure. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ. Those who, they say when they are struck by a disaster, إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Surely to Allah we belong and to Him we all return. So we've mentioned this many times before. We are always supposed to be reminded that for a believer, a believer is not suicidal. A believer is not trying to end his life. But a believer understands that this life is a liability. As long as I'm alive, I need to live in a good way. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect my iman from fitna, from my losing my faith. And when death comes, a believer is not sad of leaving this world behind. But rather they recognize that, you know what? Okay, now whatever iman I have, now that death has come, it will not go away. It's now saved. It's now, like basically the test is over. As long as I'm living, it's a liability. As long as I'm living, it's a liability. I have to constantly ask Allah and worry, Ya Allah, protect my faith. Don't allow fitna to come to me. Because you don't know that you might see a person today, may Allah protect us all. You might see a person today in the first line, being foremost, and sometime down the road, you might see this person doing things and saying things which are complete opposite. Because a test came, either a doubt or a temptation, and it blew them off. There are so many examples of this. May Allah protect us all. So, the believers, they recognize all the time that, look, to Allah we belong and to Him we will return. We came from Allah, we have to go back. Everything else is not worth risking our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ صَلَوَاتٌ مِّن رَبِّهِمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ. That though they are the ones who will receive Allah's blessings and mercy, and it is they who are the rightly guided, as opposed to those who are not getting out of their comfort zone, who are always protecting their investments. So they were the munafiqeen. They used to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La ilaha ula wa la ilaha ula. That they are not with them and they are not with them. So they would say, when they are with the believers, they would say, we are believers. And when they were with the disbelievers, they would say, we are just joking with them. We are really with you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مُذَبْذَبِينَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ لَا إِلَهَ أُولَا وَلَا إِلَهَ أُولَا. They're not here all the way, they're not here all the way. And what is their punishment? إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرْكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ. They will be in the lowest pits of the fire because they basically hedge their bets. And they are not here all the way, they are not here all the way. They're even lower than the openly disbelievers. So, what is this problem? This problem is the worry, they say the fear of losing out. The fear of missing out, FOMO as they say. That a person, they are afraid that, look, if I commit myself to the deen, I will miss out on so much good in this world. So let me not completely give up the deen, na'udhu billah, but also not go fully into it. I'm just going to stay in the back. If any difficulties come, I'll be the first one to run. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that these are not the people who are the truly rightly guided one. In order for the mission to succeed, you have to be all in. I have to buy in. If you are, think about when layoffs come in a company. When layoffs come in a company, generally speaking, there is somebody there that is saying, okay, who is the person who clocks in at 9 o'clock and who is the person who clocks out at 5 p.m.? As opposed to someone who says, let me come a little bit early to do some extra work. Let me do a little bit more. Who is the person who says, well, the project is not finished. Okay, I'm going to clock out, but I will stay and I will just make sure I finish the work that I need to get done. So, when time comes for cutting, the first people that, of course, any company will cut, any wise person will cut, will be the people who are barely there. And sometimes they say, well, we need to even cut the sincere workers, and that happens. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of the brothers and sisters who are in situations like that. But essentially, you don't earn the respect if you are the one who is basically barely walking the line. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who remember that to Allah we belong and to Him we will return, they are the ones who are the rightly guided ones. They are the ones that will receive the mercy from Allah and blessings, that they are going all in. And we'll stop, inshallah, with this ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الصَّفَا وَالْمَرْوَةَ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما ومن تطوع خيرا فإن الله شاكر عليم. Indeed, the hills of Safa and Marwa are among the symbols of Allah. So whoever makes a major or minor pilgrimage to the sacred house, Hajj and Umrah, let them walk between the two hills. Or there's no harm upon them for them to walk between the two hills. وَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ خَيْرًا, and whoever does good willingly, Allah, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَاكِرٌ عَلِيمٌ, Allah is truly appreciative, all-knowing. So there is when there's a new prophet, which is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, every practice of the Jahiliyyah is being revised. That which is good is being kept. That which is bad is being abandoned. So the question is that, okay, now the Qibla is the sacred house. The Qibla is the Kaaba. And we make tawaf around it. We make hajj about it. But what about this practice of going between Safa and Marwa? Is this something from the true teachings of Islam? From Ibrahim alayhi salam? Or is this one of those things as well which has been made up? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers that question, and He says that فَمَنْ حَجَّ الْبَيْتَ أَوْ اعْتَمَرَ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِ أَنْ يَطَّوَّفَ بِهِمَا. There will be no sin upon you for you to make this. Meaning this is from the true remnants of the millah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now, but in the beginning He says, إِنَّ الصَّفَا وَالْمَرْوَةَ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ. That the Safa and Marwa are symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is a symbol of Allah? What are the sha'air? So the scholars say that the adhan is from the sha'air of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, when you go to a place, if you go to, those of us who live in the West, one of the beautiful, pleasant surprises that we experience when we go to the East is the adhan. That when the time of adhan comes, there is like adhan all over, like every masjid is giving adhan. And to the people over there, they're like, oh man, here, 7 masajid going at each other giving adhan. But for us, we are like, subhanallah, this feels so good. It refreshes your iman to hear the sound of the adhan, right? So they say that the sound of adhan being proclaimed out loud in a Muslim society, this is from the symbols of Allah and the symbols of Islam. Same way, things which are done publicly, they are symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you see them, your iman increases. So he says that, what are other things that are from the sha'ir? What do you think? Udhiyah. Okay, so when we sacrifice on Eid al-Adha, it should be done where, in the Muslim countries, again, on the day of Eid al-Adha, all you see is sacrifice going all around. Okay, so again, this is something from the sha'ir as well. What else? What is that? Hijab. Hijab, definitely like the general Islamic dress code. That when you go in a society and you see that, okay, you don't have to like wonder, is this a Muslim society or not? You can clearly tell. And one of the interesting things is that Muslim societies all over the world, they have their own dress code. If you look at the hijab style of Turkey versus the hijab style of some West African countries, and the hijab style of India and Pakistan, the hijab style of the Khalij, everybody has their own style of hijab. It still meets the general principles of Islam, but everybody has their own unique way. You look at the men's dress, you look at the Pakistani shalwar kameez, Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi, the long kameez. You look at the Arab, you have the long thobe. You look at Indonesia, Malaysia, they have the short shirt, which is still like basically a thobe, but it's cut off like somewhere in your thigh area. So the general idea is loose clothing. General idea is simple, modest clothing, but you will see different taste of it all over. So some things are practices which are public practices, and a lot of the new Muslims, when they come, these are the things they're appreciating. They're like, you know what? I really appreciate how when it's time for prayer, wherever the Muslims are, they start praying. This is from one of the symbols. One of them is also, by the way, is the Salatul Jum'ah and Salatul Eid, where big crowds come together to pray. These are again from the sha'ir of Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Safa and Marwa are also from among them. They are from among them. And again, when you go and you experience there, when it's crowded, you're like, subhanAllah, what an energy is present there, right? If you think about, there's no special dua that you're supposed to be making between Safa and Marwa that we find from the Sunnah. In between as you're doing, you're just supposed to walk between them. Okay? Any other dhikr you make, it's up to you, it's optional, it's good, no problem, nothing specific. Except when you get to Safa, when you get to Marwa, you read this ayah. And you see an energy there that you're like, where is this coming from? What is this for? There's no salah here. There's no like special practice here, except just walking here. And what is this? This is Hajar walking. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this place some special significance. The Safa and Marwa are from the sha'ir of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is from the good remnants, so there's no harm in it. Go ahead and do that. وَمَن تَطَوَّعَ خَيْرًا, and whoever does good, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَاكِرٌ عَلِيمٌ. Allah is truly shakir. So for us, when we are grateful, we are thanking Allah, we are appreciative of His blessings. When Allah is grateful, He is grateful, He's appreciative of us being grateful. Meaning, sometimes if you are being good to someone, that person doesn't appreciate it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, Allah appreciates, and He's alim, He knows. Meaning, you don't have to show off to people. Allah knows whatever it is that you're doing for His sake. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all the tawfiq to be from among those people who are patient and persevere in our deen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from among those who are companions of salah and companions of patience. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all the tawfiq to visit the sha'air of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to experience them, to make Hajj and Umrah. And inshallah, in the next whole month, inshallah, the month of June, our nightly series after Salat al-Isha, we're going to be doing virtues and ahadith about Hajj and Umrah and Mecca and Medina and Dhul Hijjah, because there are three things that come together in this time. For those who go to Hajj, the blessed place, the blessed time, and the blessed act. For some people who are in Mecca but they're not making Hajj, they are in the blessed place and they're in the blessed time, but they're not doing the blessed act. For those of us who are not able to go this time, we are in the blessed time, but we are not getting to do the blessed place and the blessed act of Hajj, but there are other blessed acts that we can do. So for those people who are there, they get to combine all three. But anywhere you are, whether you're making Hajj or not, even if you're there, you get to experience one or two or three of those blessed things that come together during this time. And thus the Prophet ﷺ has said that the best 10 days of the year, are the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. And the best 10 nights of the year are the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So the 10 nights of Dhul Hijjah, the first 10 nights of Dhul Hijjah, are just behind the nights of Ramadan. And the last 10 days of Ramadan, separate from the nights, are just behind the days of Dhul Hijjah, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So these days, those of us, again, who are not going to Hajj, should fast these days. Those who are going to Hajj, they need to look at their physical condition. And I always personally recommend people that those who are going for Hajj, they should not fast, because it's very hot and you're being exposed to so many different viruses. You're not sleeping properly, you're not eating properly. So you are here for the big mission of making Hajj. If you get sick because your body becomes weak, you're going to miss out. I've seen people being taken in an ambulance from Arafah to a hospital on the day of Arafah. And that's a sad case. And these are usually people who exerted themselves so much before the days of Hajj. So those days, as you're leading up to Hajj, you basically take it easy and you prepare for the big day and you make Hajj. Those who are not going for Hajj, For those people, they should exert themselves in their different ibadat, in making dhikr, in making fasting. Those people who miss days of fasting in the month of Ramadan, this is a great time that up until the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, you can double dip. So up until the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, you can make up days that you missed in Ramadan. You can make them up with double intention. Your primary intention being that you're making up a missed day of fasting in Ramadan, but also you're fasting in the days of Dhul Hijjah. But you cannot do that on the day of Arafah. Why? Because Arafah is itself a special day of fasting. It's not required, but it is basically a specific act which has been singled out in the Sharia. So on the other days have not been singled out, but generally all of the sacred months are special. But this particular day of Arafah is a special day where the Prophet ﷺ told us whoever fasts on this day will have the sins of the year before and the year after forgiven. So on that day, we don't do double dip. On that day, we only do the day of Arafah itself, intention. The rest of the days, and even after Eid al-Adha, after the 3 days of Tashriq, you can fast, and these are great days to make up. Inshallah, we'll be discussing all of these in detail in the nightly Khatiras every night, whenever we don't have any other programs. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. So, sunrise was 29, so it's exactly 12 minutes now. Inshallah, we can pray 2 rakats and go for breakfast.